This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast, and I'm joined by Steve. Welcome to the podcast. Tell me, how did you get into Status Quo?
Ooh. It was about 1991, and I was roughly 5 years old, and I remember hearing Caroline in the car, and I just remember that intro, and I just remember the suspense of the intro and the build-up, and the relief when the drum and bass came in, and that was it. It just blew my mind. I mean, I was already into older music anyway because I'd already purchased Freddie Mercury and Meatloaf and T-Rex by that point, and Quo came into the mix, and it just completely changed my life from that point onwards.
Excellent. I mean, that is. Was that just on the radio, just random?
I think it was. I mean, I've got a feeling it may have been a live version of Caroline, thinking about it, because the Live Alive Quo had just come out at that point. So it might have been something promotional to do with that.
Yeah. Now, we've spoken prior to this, and you're one of those people where Quo has really had an influence on your life, hasn't it?
Massively so, yes. If it wasn't for the band, I wouldn't have discovered certain things to get to the point in life where I am now. Um, I guess that started in 2005. I was at Guildfest, predominantly there to see Quo headline, and I knew every other band on the bill apart from one other band, and that band was the Zombies. A lot of people don't know the band by name, but they know their biggest hit, She's Not There and Time of the Season. And I stuck around for their set, and they walked on stage and started off with a song called Andorra. And that had the same impact on me as first hearing Caroline. And over time, I got to know the band, the Zombies, and eventually I got called up to be a UK correspondent for their official fan club. And a couple of years doing that led to me doing like a professional advert for their original drummer, Hugh Grundy. It was just after when Rick unfortunately passed away, and they did a song called Rockstar, because 2016, lots of people passed. So they did one big tribute record, and Rick had a lovely little segment in it. And I approached that particular band and said, look, I'll do an advert for you through the official fan club, not knowing what I was doing. So I'd done it from the heart and done it on instinct. And the ad went out, and it reached something on the region of 10,000 people within a couple of hours. And then a couple of days went by, and people was approaching me asking if I could do their social media. So that's how that transition started, from me doing that one post to then a couple of years down the line going professional and starting my own social media management and content business.
Which is Rossi's social media, right?
Yes.
Is that, is that your actual surname?
It is my actual surname.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not related to Francis, and I did get my name changed by deed poll about 10 years ago. To cut a very, very long story short, my first child was being born, and there was no way that my father's last name was going to be involved. He's not been in my life for 20 years. The way I saw it, my mum and my sister can get married and have their last name changed. So I did something about it. But at that point in time of choosing a last name, I didn't want a Quo related thing because everyone thought that's what I was going to do. And I tried about 200 different things and nothing worked. And it was funny enough, it was a Quo gig actually. We were sat around the table. It was Croydon Fairfield Halls. And I had a list of potentials, and I was trying signatures and nothing was working. And a friend of mine said, just try Rossi. And I begrudgingly done it, wrote it down, did a signature, and it was like, oh, goodness sake, it works. And then nothing else after that seemed right. So it was like, oh, well, I'm doing it then. No one will believe me.
Well, it puts you in a very special rank with the guy who changed his name by deed poll to Status Quo.
Yeah, but the good thing is, I then had my own identity.
Hmm.
I didn't have my father hanging over me. I could move forward with my life, and and it's a decision I don't ever regret, to be honest.
Well, no, and in some way was influenced by Status Quo. I mean, how many times, like, how much of a fan would you say that you were of the Quo?
I've I've been classed as an obsessive fan at points.
Hmm.
Even my ex-wife named Quo in our divorce. But yeah, I mean, I've seen them live well into the triple figures now. My collection is just insane. I mean, I'm looking over at a chest of drawers from IKEA, and it's got 6 drawers in it, and that's just full of CDs. There's Calex units just full of vinyl. So and I mean, the bootleg side of things, I've got boxes and boxes and boxes of audience recordings and books. So yeah, it can be quite an expensive hobby.
I'm sure there are many fans out there that agree with you. I think of any band. I mean, are you, as to use your word, obsessive about other bands as you are about that? I mean, you named the Zombies earlier.
Yeah, well, it was being obsessive with them, which got me involved with them professionally as well. And I mean, when the original incarnation of the Zombies stopped, another band was formed called Argent. If you don't know who Argent are, they had a big hit with a song called Hold Your Head Up,
Hmm.
which the Lancaster Bombers covered. And it's on the Alan Lancaster Life After Quo album.
Well, I don't think it was. It wasn't the Lancaster Bombers. It was the
Party
Party
Boys.
Boys.
Yeah, that's right. And then their other big hit, which a lot of people think Kiss are the original, they're
Hmm.
not, is God Gave Rock and Roll to You.
Hmm.
And because of my association with the Zombies, because the whole Zombies family is one big family. You've got the Zombies, then there was Argent, and then when the Zombies reformed, the original incarnation and the current members do gigs together. There's no old versus new. It's fantastic. But it led me to work with John Verity, who was the frontman of Argent, and he was in John Coglan's Diesel band as well.
So yeah, that there's. I mean,
Yeah,
you are proving what I thought about this podcast is that everything leads back to Quo in some way.
yeah. I mean, even Jim Wadford, who was in Argent, he done the last 18 years of the Zombies before he passed away.
Hmm.
He was in the Kinks for 18 years and played on some of their big American albums. He was in Diesel band as well.
Connections all over the
Yeah,
place.
I mean, it was a shame because I was going to have a chat with Jim about his time with the Kinks, and I was going to touch on his time with John Coglan. Unfortunately, he passed and it never happened.
Which
It's such a
which
shame.
is a great shame because I assumed that he wasn't working on anything else that was kind of biographical.
Well, he wasn't. Jim kept a lot of diaries. And since he's passed, his family have collated these diaries, and a book will be coming out. I did get sent a preview of it, and it just looks wonderful, and it's a great tribute to him.
Well, that's excellent. I'm sure fans will look out for that.
Mm.
Maybe there will be some mentions of Diesel in there somewhere.
I hope so. I will let you know once I finish reading it.
Yeah. Well, if we go back to let's go back to Quo here,
Yeah.
because this is the Quo-Cast. You're involved with the fan club. How did that come about?
Oh God. February 2019, I got an email from Yvonne Hanvey, who runs FTMO, and she organises the FTMO official Status Quo fan club convention at Butlins. And she wanted to talk to me about social media and sort of up in the game on that side of things. And we met in Fareham and had lunch and discussed various things. After a discussion or two, I came on board and started initially advertising the convention, which I came on board in the February and the convention was in the September. So there was a lot of work to do, but we pulled it off and we had a great convention, which then led to me being at the convention and doing live streams on the convention page, covering it, doing updates for the people that were there. It was just such a wonderful thing to be a part of. I've worked a lot of festivals and a lot of gigs of bands, and the convention was probably one of the best organised events I've been at.
And do you think that's because of the organisation of the organisers, or do you think it was the fans?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't work the first two conventions, so by the time I came on board, they were already seasoned on what they did, which I think helped. And everybody knew what they had to do, performers, merch people, crew, everybody. And the fans were just absolutely wonderful. I mean, I was there taking pictures and doing videos and trying to get fans in them as well. And everyone just banded together. It was wonderful.
I mean, I haven't been to the convention myself, but I've heard great things. I mean, are you already talking about the next one, which I believe is in 2022?
Yes. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about that at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe we're just waiting on Butlins now in the COVID situation. Once Butlins can get things sorted, then the appropriate dates will be announced.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, people have to look forward to a new tour from the Quo due in the new year, the Out Quoing tour. And obviously, I know that you didn't have anything to do with that, but I've spoken to people before about their social media and what they're doing. I mean, what is your take on the way in which they advertise on social media?
It's a very difficult thing is advertising on social media, because if you put too many links in, less people will see it. So, I mean, the post that Quo did yesterday was very, very good. And the post that I curated for FTMO did equally as well. I mean, I met with Yvonne and Paul last week and she said, I've got a post for you. And I was like, oh yeah, what's that? She went, new Quo tour. And then I had to keep a straight face, and inside I was going, yes. But, I weren't allowed to tell anyone. I got sent over the assets for it, which is like the pictures and the blurb, literally just a couple of days before. And I had to get it put together in a post, draft sent off, approved, and then scheduled ready for Tuesday midday. So I found it nerve-wracking because it's a band very close to my heart and I didn't want to stuff it up.
Well, I don't blame you because, this is a band that you followed for most of your life. And, a tour, certainly at the moment, is probably going to have a much more heightened effect than it would normally, because they've been touring, basically on the road for the past 50 plus years.
Yeah, I mean, this is the longest they've ever had off, I think.
Possibly, although there might be some fans that may debate that fact. I'm sure that I don't know. I can't say, but you're possibly
I know in the
right
late 70s they didn't tour for 2 years because they were in tax exile and here, there, and everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it's probably on par with that.
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, in the meantime, before that tour, do you ever go back and revisit any of the albums?
I'm constantly listening to them. I mean, what we've been doing on the FTMO page, we've been posting up when albums are being released and just going through all the albums. I mean, Never Too Late hit 40. I mean, Rock Till You Drop hits 30 this year. So we'll be doing something for that. I mean, 1982 came out a couple of weeks ago in 1982, obviously. I mean, famous in the last century, you know, not everyone's favorite album, but it turned 21 and that was an achievement. You know, in my mind, I don't mind famous in the last century. I have some good memories revolving around that album. And I don't think without that album, we probably wouldn't get to where we were with Heavy Traffic and the albums that followed. So that they needed something to transition.
I think that is the case. I mean, I will put this to you. The other day, I was filming for some YouTube stuff, and I listened to Blue for You, then the Rockin' album, then If You Can't Stand the Heat. And my wife and I were saying how much we love Accident Prone.
Yeah.
However, we feel like if they'd skipped that rockin' bit in the middle and just gone straight from Blue for You to Accident Prone, you're missing out that middle bit, the experimentation that went through.
Accident Prone, I think, for me, is one of the most underrated singles they have released. It should have got higher in the charts than when it did. But who knows? I mean, funny enough, at the convention, Status Quotes did a live version of Accident Prone. And it was just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I mean, as soon as I heard that opening chord, I thought, record.
Because the structure of that song and that particular period in 1978 when they were recording that stuff is incredibly experimental. The use of backing singers, the horn section that's on it, and even the kind of prototype for Whatever You Want, which is Oh What a Night at the beginning there. I know that a previous guest, Raymond, said that Rick's playing style was very different. He didn't do the ordinary thing. It was a very unique thing. Now, sorry, go on.
I think it just shows how versatile Quo can be. I mean, everyone thinks, they say three chords and they play the same. But you listen to the albums, and there's always moments on every album where it's vastly different, and it just shows how fantastic of musicians they are, their ability to write melodies and to have appropriate music for that is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, a lot of people don't like Thirsty Work, but that is a classic example of how versatile they can be.
I mean, have you ever had that moment when you're listening to an album and you have what you might call, and I'm not using the words, I'm just using the abbreviation, a WTF moment, where it's a very much on one note and then suddenly they completely surprise you with something on an album?
I had that a lot with the Backbone album. I remember buying it and I put it on and it was like, wow. I mean, Waiting for a Woman, I think, was a perfect opening song for that album. And then when you get to the track Backbone itself, there's so many wonderful little bits in it, and the middle part. It shouldn't work, but it does. And if they ever play that live, it'd be interesting to see how they do it.
And speaking of live, I mean, you've been promoting the tour with From the Makers of, the fan club. Have you any intention to go to any of the dates?
Guildford so far. And then I will see. It depends on my own working commitments, because if gigs are happening, I'm going to be booked left, right and centre to do social media at gigs.
I mean, this is an important thing, because I know the one consensus that fans seem to have was they didn't come to my neck of the woods. And what do you think is the reason for that?
My personal opinion is you've got to think about all the venues are probably already booked up from tours being cancelled from 2020. So a lot of commitments are still having to be met. Which doesn't mean to say they won't go to their neck of the woods, because once these gigs start happening, these venues will become free again. So it's just get the COVID backlog out the way and then see what happens, in my opinion.
And do you think, in your opinion, that Quo will tour after that?
I hope so. I can be quite selfish when I'm thinking about that because I don't ever want them to stop, because they've been such a constant part of my life. It'd be like, well, what do I do when they finish?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you know, they're of a certain age now. They've all got families. You know, they should enjoy their time, and quite rightly so.
Well, I think they've more than deserved it. You know,
Mm.
deserved the rest. Although Francis keeps talking about being in lockdown and painting fences, I would imagine he's finished them all by now.
Oh, well, I'm sure he's got the money to buy some more.
I'm sure that that is the case. I mean, speaking of that, do you have any stories about meeting the band yourself?
I've met them on several occasions, but I've met them in some funny situations. I mean, a lot of their kids are in bands themselves. And I think one thing that, I mean, Little Egypt was Nick and Kieran Rossi's band. Freddie Edwards and Max Edwards have been in so many bands themselves. One of their early bands was a band called Toothpaste Factory.
Mm-hmm.
They're fantastic. I mean, they used to play the John Peel Club in Kingston quite a lot. And for me, I don't care who their dad is. I was there to see them and their band, and I'll be rocking down the front. And every so often, Rhino would turn up to pick them up. And, you know, you can tell who the Quo fans were because they'd leave the front to go and talk to Rhino. Whereas I didn't care he was there. You know, I spoke to him afterwards and I had a couple of beers. But, I mean, just trying to think. The first time I met Rick and Francis, 2013. So what would that would have been the Riffs tour. And
2003, you mean?
Yeah, 3 even, yeah.
Yeah.
Not slept. Yeah, so 2003, it was freezing bloody cold because they do winter tours. And I just remember, because I lived in Croydon at that time, because that's where I grew up. And I thought I'd just walk backstage and see what the situation is. And as I turned up, the bus pulled up. So that was the first time meeting Rick and Francis. The first time I met Rhino, I was at a little club in Sutton called the Boom Boom Club, which I've worked many a gig there now because the Zombies have played there a fair bit, and Colin Blunstone, the lead singer, does shows there. And Toothpaste Factory was supporting a band called the Mods. I was there to see the Mods. The guy that runs it is a guy called Johnny Warman. He's been in loads of bands in the 70s and the 80s. And in my mind, that's who I was there to see. I didn't know who was supporting. So Toothpaste Factory turned up, and then there was Rhino and Matt Letley.
Mm-hmm.
And they came and sat on the same table as us. And I was just chatting to them normally as what I am with you now. And I think that's what I try and do with people. I don't try and see them as this rock star. I just see them as normal people and just have a conversation.
Well, from my experience, I've spoken to Rhino myself, and he's very, very down to earth.
Yeah.
There's kind of no airs and graces. It's very, what you see is what you get.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lovely moment with him at the convention. He just finished his set headlining Saturday night with Rhino's Revenge. And leading up to the convention, I was going through a terrible time. My aunt died 5 days before. The day before my aunt died, my relationship with my ex broke down. So it got to the convention, and, you know, I was finding the strength just to professionally do my job. And Rhino was doing his set, and one of my all-time favourite songs ever is Jungle Love, which opened the Rhino's Revenge album. And I've told him several times, you know, it's one of those songs that did change my life. When I heard that intro and the drums come in, and then when he brings in that scream at the beginning and then the bass comes in, it's just fantastic. And I said to him afterwards, I said, look, John, I said, I've had a really crappy week. Your set really, really cheered me up. And he patted me on the back, and you could see the appreciation just from that one comment. It was really quite lovely.
I mean, what a moment! It's lovely when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. And during his set, I was standing on the side of the stage and taking some backline pictures with the audience. And I was just stood down and thinking, I've missed this because I hadn't seen Rhino's Revenge for a couple of years. And his music is so underrated, it's unreal. From the two albums he's done, there are so many high points on them. It's unreal.
I think you can say that for most of the solo members.
Yeah,
That certainly, I mean, the other one I'm thinking of, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, and because the latest fan club magazine is dedicated to him,
yes.
Andy Bowen's solo material, like Rhino's, is very underappreciated.
Yeah, I mean, his first four albums, you don't really see them. I mean, two of them fortunately got a CD release on a South Korean record label, and they've done a really good job on the remastering. It's quite remarkable. But I've been listening to them again recently because he done his FTMO interview, and there's some fantastic songs. I mean, I know he said in the magazine there's some of it he doesn't like anymore, and I think I can see why. Because when you're a musician or creative, you look back on some of your past work and you think, oh, that could be better. But they are very, very strong albums. I mean, his first one, Gone to My Head, it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And then to come in with Unfinished Business was just fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, there isn't a duff song on that album, in my opinion.
Oh, it was very strong. And I think at the time, I don't know whether, I think it's like this with a lot of things. I think people assume because he's in Status Quo, every song in that album needs to be a Quo reject. And it really wasn't.
No. And I think, in my humble opinion, of course, that people who think a solo member doing an album, it should sound like Quo. No, it shouldn't, because at the end of the day, it's their album as an extension of their personality. And Unfinished Business is, quintessentially Andrew. Such quirky lyrics.
Oh, I think he's always had a talent for that. And I read a review a while back of that album, and I can't remember whether it was a review or an interview, but they said that it was very uncharacteristic of him to stray into country on a couple of the tracks. Now, you've listened to those early albums. He's constantly straying into country.
Oh, God, yeah, particularly the first two that he did. I mean, Sweet William, there's two or three songs on that album that do go into it. I mean, even when he was in The Herd, there was a country undertone to them.
I mean, maybe that is why he blends so well into Quo, because Quo have
Mm.
that kind of country underbelly as well.
I mean, it was funny. I met John Chalice, who played Boyce in Only Fools and Horses a few
Hmm.
years ago. And I bought, when Quo released the pictures compilation, they done it in a big book with all the pictures in it. Well, I bought it so Boyce can sign his page. And we had a great conversation about Quo, but his manager was this lady who was sat in the corner, and she went, "Come here." And she went, "You see him?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's Andrew Bown." She went, "I dated him in the 60s and used to do LSD with him." So it's, so it was, again, I had another lovely conversation with someone about the band.
In very unexpected places.
Yes. Yeah, so I went to meet Boise and ended up talking about Andrew for 45 minutes.
Yeah, but the you're right. The Unfinished Business album is very good. It seems an unusual thing, and I don't know whether you can shed any light on this, but the Korean re-releases, where how does something like that come to be?
Well, I've had a bit of experience of this record label recently because Argent, who I've mentioned earlier, they had one album that's never been reissued on CD, and the South Korean record label released it at the start of this year, but nobody knew. From what I believe happens is for these record labels is they'll go to the people who own the publishing, and they will buy a license so they can get these songs released. So they must have gone over to owns. I mean, there's two Andrew albums now out on this label, so it must be the same publishers. There's still two albums that have never come out on CD, so I'm hoping this label will bring them out because people deserve to hear it.
Because if you're a record collector like myself, it's very hard to get hold of these albums originally.
Yes, I was very lucky with his first three albums. It's where I grew up. There was a fantastic record shop called Beano's, and they knew who I was. So anything Quo related, they used to keep behind the counter for me. So I'd walk in and I used to see pound signs in their eyes. And yeah, they had a collection, and the first three albums were there, and I just instantly bought them, not thinking about it. And I had a meet and greet with the band at Epsom Downs Racecourse the first time they did that gig. And I bought the Gone to My Head album for Andrew to sign. And he looked at me and he went, "Where'd you get this from? I think there was only about 500 made." So it's a funny old game, record collecting. It really is, because you don't know if there's 500 made or 50,000.
And do you find yourself not play? Like, do you play these records, or are you that collector that just keeps them in a box?
I have records to play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got one here that's worth a fair bit of money. It's not out on CD, so I've played it 3 times. Once to check it, second time after I cleaned it and made sure it was fine, and then I converted it to CD. But even then, the CD convert don't sound right, so I still play the record.
I think that's right, because I appreciate those who buy records in order to collect them and have it as a thing, but there is something quite special about putting the needle on the record and listening to it as it was intended.
It's the tangibility of it as well. I mean, it's something that you hold, you look after it, and if you look after it, you get perfect sound from it forever.
Yeah, well, only if you look after it, of course.
Yes, but I mean, I'm the type of guy that's got 10 different copies of one album. If it's something slightly different about it, it goes in the collection.
And have you got anything like that with Quo?
Pretty much every album they've done. Where they're big worldwide, if I come across a different pressing, it comes home with me.
And is that normally, like, what's the difference between pressings?
I mean, for example, if they released... when Hello came out, it was released on the Spaceship Vertigo label in the UK with a poster. So that's in the collection. The German one was on a Vertigo Swell label. So that's in the collection. The American one was released on A&M. So because that's different, that's in the collection. And then when it got reissued in the early 80s, it was on a yellow Vertigo label. So it's like, for goodness sake, that's different, in the collection. So it's just slight minorities.
And is there ever any difference in audio quality?
Yes. Usually when an album gets reissued, they redo the pressing plates. So I found with the early 80s reissues, because they were more budget, they were just transferred onto a disc and pressed. So compared to the original release, like the nice price reissues don't hold up against the originals. But the 180 gram reissues they've done over the last few years, they've put a lot of care into them and they sound phenomenal.
I mean, the 180 gram, isn't that just a myth that sounds great?
I've had many an argument about this.
Okay.
When you go back to records that come out in the 1960s and early 70s, they were on 180 gram to 200 gram records. And they were bulletproof. When the 70s came about and they wanted to save money on things, they made thinner quality records. I mean, in America, RCA had Dynaflex, and they were pretty almost floppy disk-like. And the sound quality doesn't match up to them, which is why over the last 15 years, record companies have reinvested in vinyl, making them back at the correct gram.
In order to preserve that original sound, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I find the deeper the groove, the better the sound you get, and the bass transposes better. Whereas if you listen to a lot of particularly 80s records, when they started recycling vinyl, you know, you get bits of label in the groove and stuff, you lose a lot of the bass and it sounds too high and it can be a bit tinny.
I mean, this is a conversation that could go on and on. I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some vinyl purists, particularly, you know, yeah, like I said, being involved with a record shop as well, I hear this conversation nearly every day. And sometimes I just like to sit there and be devil's advocate.
I mean, that record store, is that CDs, actual records, or
No, that in the store itself, it's Heathen Chemistry in Fareham, is all vinyl. There is no call for CDs whatsoever.
and was that a conscious effort on that part of?
Yeah, I mean, Simon, who started the shop, just wanted to do records. And it's led us in good stead because it's new and secondhand, so you get the best of both worlds.
So I suppose that means that people bring in stuff and you basically buy it, right?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
You know, the whole point of record collecting is you go and have a dig. So you don't know what you find. So if someone brings in a collection, for me, that's my dig. And I found a couple of my holy grails in that process, like an original Tokyo Quo.
I mean, that's something else, isn't it? That's a
Yeah,
real find. Yeah.
yeah. I remember going through this collection, and it was this guy. I mean, he's become a good friend of mine now, but he had 3 bags, and he said it's all Quo. And whenever someone says that to me, I'm like, well, I've got most of it. There was 122 records in there, and for the first time in many, many years, I kept the majority. It was all European presses. I mean, there was the Tokyo Quo album. That it was a gold mine of stuff.
That is some commitment, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
and they were pristine, absolutely pristine. So I even replaced a couple of my old ones.
which is fantastic. I mean, you must have spent a lot of money on acquiring some of these things.
I've been very lucky. When I was a teenager, I was involved in a little record shop in Wallington, in near London, and that was called Bebop's. And when I started working there about 12, 13, for a couple of years, he just paid me in vinyl. So that's how I got my collection started. And because I knew the going buy-in rates for them, I knew how to negotiate a deal. So particularly the rarer stuff, I very rarely paid full price for.
Goodness.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have spent money in the past, but I've been incredibly lucky to get what I have.
Because with this stuff, you can go on forever.
Particularly with Quo,
Yeah.
because their reach is worldwide, it's going to be never ending. I mean, I've apart from 2 albums, I've got all the UK presses.
So which two are they?
The first 2.
Yeah.
I want the original Blue Pie
I
presses.
thought you were going to say that because those records, even in repressings, are really hard to get hold of.
Yeah, although they got repressed this year via Music on Vinyl, so that they're readily available now. And they've done a good job on them. I mean, I came close to Spare Parts about 20 years ago. Again, was in Beano's, and it was on the wall for 80 quid, which is a very good price. But I had no money on me. And I managed to get back there about 10 days later with the money, and it gone.
Which is a shame. I bet you're gutted about that.
Yeah, just a bit. I've never let that go. But the funny thing is, with their first album, I've got an original American press and an original Argentinian, and I think Brazilian as well. But I just can't get the UK one.
I wonder why that is, because it didn't really sell, did it?
No, but particularly in America, because it was released on the Cadet label. They did push it, and they pressed a lot of copies. And
Well,
the British invasion was quite big in America at that point. So if you were British, you sold well.
well, that's just that's an adventure that you're going to have to continue to be on, even though you have all of these albums. I mean, I asked this to most Quo fans that come on here. Which album do you find yourself revisiting more than others?
It depends on my mood. I enjoy every album. I personally don't get into this old versus new. So if I fancy a bit of 80s Quo, I think my go-to 80s one now, the last couple of weeks, has been Live at the NEC. I've been playing that a lot. But then the week before, I was playing, what was it? Backbone a lot. And then the week before that, I think I gave Famous in the Last Century a spin. So it's really difficult. But I think the one that I would say is the number one for me to go back to is quite possibly Mark Kelly's.
Which is very underrated at times.
Yes, and I think only because that was the first studio album of theirs I bought.
Wow. I mean that's a good choice. It's a good choice. Now I will wrap it up here, but give us a plug for Rossi's social media.
Yeah, so Rossi's social media, I essentially manage social media pages. I can create content. I can go out on the road and do live feeds and capture content. Had a lot of success with the Zombies, FTMO via Quo, John Verity of Argent, and John Williams, who you had on your show the other week. So, yeah, just look me up on Facebook.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I do recommend doing that, and thank you for the John Williams connection as well. That's great. The John Williams Syndicate is releasing a new album. I mean, to work with somebody of John's stature must be like wow.
Yeah, again, that came about because Chris White from the Zombies, I do his solo stuff on social media. So it's called the Chris White Experience. His sons, Matt and Jamie, curate that, but they also own a publishing company called Sunfish. And Sunfish is dealing with the John Williams Syndicate's publishing. And they said, well, we've got a guy. And that's literally how that came about. So if it wasn't for Quo, me discovering the Zombies, to then working with Chris White on his solo stuff, I wouldn't be working with John now. So it all stems back to Quo.
I mean, that is amazing, and we shall leave it there. It all stems back to Quo. I wholeheartedly agree. And thanks, Steve, for being on the podcast today.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.